Good morning, everyone. I'm David Barish, Chairman of the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board. As always, I'd ask you all to put your electronic devices on silent. With us today, Jen Langen, representing Joe Torsella, State Treasurer. Kristen, representing Secretary of Revenue Dan Hassel. Quorum of the board being present, I will call today's proceedings to order. First order of business, Pledge of Allegiance. Yesterday, the board held an executive session on Tuesday, December 17th to discuss personnel matters and to conduct quasi-judicial deliberations relating to matters coming before the board this morning. I'd also like to announce that the funding for the local law enforcement grant program under Section 1408 of the Act is being re-implemented this year. We have posted the information on the website with the guidelines for local enforcement agencies to apply for these grants to combat illegal gambling. The date by which the law enforcement agencies must apply is January 21st, 2020. First order of business this morning is to address the petition of Mountain View Thoroughboat Racing Association for approval of a Cat 4 license for Hollywood Casino in York, Pennsylvania. Again, as always, I'd ask everybody who's going to speak, please state and spell your name for the court reporter prior to your presentation. I would also like at this time that all non-attorney witnesses would please stand and be sworn at this time.
You all raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give us today will be true, the truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Adrian, you can begin.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. I think this is the last meeting of the year. It's been an eventful year. We thank the board and the staff for all their efforts with the various initiatives that Penn National has had for you. Before I begin, I just wanted to say one thing. I believe this will likely be the last meeting for Mr. John Finnemore, who has appeared before you since the inception of gaming. John is retiring after 17 years at Penn National and 40 years in the industry. And obviously, we've been very lucky to have him. And I know John will look fondly upon his last hearing.
Should we make it eventful for you, John?
No, thank you.
And if you would bear with me, I just wanted to recognize his successor, Erin Chamberlain, is here, and she will be a senior regional vice president for the company. So with that, before we dive in, as we did the last time with Morgantown, Mr. Chairman, if I could, we'd like to do a short presentation, PowerPoint presented by the team, then switch places for a moment, bring up our traffic engineering expert, Mr. Seitz, and then I'll probably just move some documents into the record, but was thinking perhaps we could take questions maybe after the presentation, after Mr. Seitz, and then we'll move the documents in, if that makes sense.
That's fine. Thank you.
Okay. So we're here. This is the final licensing hearing necessary for us to operate Hollywood Casino York, which is obviously one of our Category 4 projects. It's actually, ironically, the first one that we bid on. I think you'll remember, I think our winning bid was in excess of $50 million. So let's get started. You know everyone here. We've John Finnemore, as I said, Senior Vice President for Regional Operations. To his right, Chris Rogers, our Senior Vice President for Corporate Development, and Dan Eim, who's the Vice President and General Manager of our mothership casino, so to speak, for these purposes, which is Hollywood Casino at Penn National Racecourse in Grantville. John is going to kick things off, and John, I'll get to your first slide.
Thank you, Adrian, and good morning. My name is John Finamore, John Finamore, Senior Vice President, Regional Operations for the company. And Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, and staff, again, good morning. The first slide is a timeline that I think really shows the incredible growth the company has undertaken over the past almost 30 years. Starting out in 1972, I think you all know the story. Penn National Racecourse opened. And as you look at some of the other milestone dates on this slide, most notably 1994 was the IPO, the initial public offering for the company. Absolutely the most transformational event took place in 1997 when the company acquired Charlestown, the Charlestown property in West Virginia for $18 million, which is hard to believe. I think we estimate that property has probably produced about $2 billion of EBITDA since that time. Other dates along the timeline here, 03 we acquired Hollywood Gaming Corporation, which is, as you know, a brand we use extensively throughout the portfolio, followed by the acquisition of Argosy Gaming in 05, which really made us a very large regional player throughout the country. 2008, of course, saw the transformation of Penn National Racecourse into Hollywood Casino at Penn National Racecourse. Property we're very proud of course. And I think the next one on the list, 2013, was the split of the company into a REIT and an operating company structure that obviously we're still a part of today. The Pinnacle acquisition in 2018 was important in many ways. I think notably for today, it brought the Meadows property into the portfolio, but it also made us the dominant player in the regional market, as you know. And looking at the far right of this slide, it just shows you the scale of this company today: 41 properties in 19 jurisdictions, 51,000 slot machines, 1,300 tables, and 28,000 team members at those properties. Next slide just shows how diversified the company is. We talked about 41 properties in 19 jurisdictions. This graphically shows that diversification of the portfolio is a good thing. As we've talked about before, if there's bad weather in one region of the country, we can weather that now. Gives us if economies are bad in certain parts of the country, it gives us that diversity. And again, you can see we stretch from Maine all the way out to Las Vegas, where we have 2 properties. A little bit about the mothership property today, because it's important that the operations for the York property will really be spearheaded by Dan Ime and his team at the Grantville property. So a little bit in case, excuse me, in case you forgot since the last time we went through this slide, we've invested $400 million at the property. As I said earlier, it opened in 2008. Currently 907 team members, 2,002 slot machines, and 75 table games. I think this one always is staggering to look at this number. $1.7 billion in taxes and fees have been paid since the inception of the property. And $364 million in salaries, wages, and benefits have been paid to our team since 2008. Slide that shows our core values, our company core values. Just run through them really quickly. Provide an unparalleled guest experience, work happy, commitment to diversity, commitment to our community, and commitment to responsible gaming. And on the right-hand side, you can see just a few of the many awards we've received and/or charitable organizations that we've supported over the years as a company. And this slide shows what the Grantville property really partners, or rather who they partner with on the charitable side. We are, as we showed you, one of our core values is community involvement, and this property is extremely involved in the community, working with the United Way, working with veterans groups more and more as well, something we're very proud of. And you can see we have helped raise almost $4.2 million for IBD research at the Milton Hershey Medical Center, but also $1.42 million to local and regional charities. And this property raised $72,000 in 2019 for the local Cancer Relay for Life, a charity that we're very involved with company-wide. And certainly at the property, we're very proud of that. That was the #1 total raised by any property in the PENN portfolio. So again, congratulations to Dan and his team. With that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Chris Rogers, and thank you.
Thanks, John. I'm Chris Rogers, CHRIS, ROGERS, and I lead development for PENN. I'm excited today to talk to you about our project in York, both because we think York is a very good gaming market, and also because it's an opportunity for us to further expand our footprint in our home state of Pennsylvania, which is important to us. A little bit about the timeline. As Adrian mentioned, we did win the very first Category 4 auction with a bid of $50 million. We selected York as our location and subsequently settled on the York Galleria as being the ideal site for this development. And we think this is going to be a neat project. We'll be helping to revitalize a struggling retail mall and hopefully be encouraging additional economic development in that area. We submitted our gaming application back in September of last year and had the public input hearing on November 1st of last year. As for the project itself, $120 million overall budget. We will be having 80,000 square feet in a single phase. Initially, we will have 500 slot machines and 24 tables with the capacity to expand to the full complement of 750 machines and 40 tables. We will be co-locating one of our OTW licenses into the Category 4, which will give us the opportunity to offer an integrated sports and race book. We think that's going to be a very good amenity for this project. Of course, we'll have various food and beverage options, including casual dining, a bar and entertainment stage, and a coffee shop. We are anticipating that construction will be complete in approximately 12 months from today. And as you can see on the next slide, we are very much underway in construction and making very good progress thus far. Moving to the floor plan, you can see in the green shaded area here, that is the main entrance, the porte cochere. Once you come into the porte cochere, you will go straight into the gaming floor area, and straight in front of you at the back is the racing and sports book with the bar. And then in the blue shaded area, you can see the restaurant and bar, as well as the entertainment lounge. Just to give you an idea of what it's going to look like, we have some concepts here. If you've been to Hollywood at Grantville, it's going to be very, very similar in design to that property, as well as what we're doing at the other Category 4 location in Morgantown. As for the site plan with parking, the porte cochere will be accessible from a main parking area that has 325 spaces. There will also be access from an upper level parking area that will feed into an escalator that can take you down straight to the main entrance on the main floor. We did engage Transportation Resources Group to do a traffic impact analysis. You're going to hear more about that in a bit. But they studied 11 intersections in total, assuming maximum build out of that property and peak hours, and found the level of service acceptable with some modest recommendations, which we'll discuss. We, of course, studied the other local impacts from this project: utilities, maintenance, the permitting, zoning, and each instance, the impacts were deemed to be negligible. We were approved with our conditional use application by the Township of Springersbury in August and entered into a development agreement with the township in November. Just want to take a moment to really thank Springersbury Township for their support for this project. They've been great partners, and we're really looking forward to working together to complete this project. The next slide shows the economic impact of this, which will be meaningful both to Springersbury Township as well as the greater York County area and, of course, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dan Ime to talk a little bit about the operations.
All right, thank you, Chris. Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners, and happy holidays to everybody. My name is Dan Ime, I-H-M. I'm the Vice President, General Manager for Hollywood Casino at Penn National Racecourse. So as Chris said, I'll just talk briefly on some of the operations for the York Casino. We will be opening with 500 slot machines, and as Chris indicated, we will have the capacity to go to 750. We'll offer both reel and video, with probably approximately 70% of those games being video, and from penny to $100 denominations. 24 table game operations with variations of blackjack, craps, roulette. We also are looking at some electronic versions of games as well as hybrids similar to what we offer at PNRC. The pari-mutuel wagering and sportsbook, we will offer ticket writers in that location for both pari-mutuel and the sportsbook operation, as well as we will also have simulcast kiosks as well as sportsbook kiosks throughout the area and throughout the gaming floor. 136-seat casual restaurant and bar, a lounge with a small stage that will offer live entertainment on Friday and Saturday evenings, grab and go, and a coffee venue. And currently, right now, we're still working on some of the concepts and the menus for those venues, but we're very excited about the food offerings at the York facility. Employment-wise, we are looking to hire a little over 200 full-time team members with benefits. We'll offer 401k, medical, dental, paid time off, bonus program, which is tied to our guest service initiatives, tuition reimbursement, that is for anybody seeking a graduate or undergraduate degree. We pay up to between $2,500 and $5,000 a year for those that are seeking that. Free table game dealer training, that's a 6-week free course that we will offer at the Grantville facility. We currently offer that now, and we'll continue to offer that for the Category 4s. And you can see to the right-hand side, that's just kind of showing a little bit about where we will be hiring majority of our staff. You can see majority of that is coming from the gaming operations, food and beverage. The gaming side is 42%. That is made up of dealers as well as slot ambassadors. So that's the bulk of that. Those positions will average around $22 an hour, just to give you an idea. Moving on to social responsibility. As the board knows, we take social responsibility very seriously, and it all starts with training and development and education. So at the facility, all the training will start with all the new hires, and then we'll do annual training thereafter. The annual training is conducted by the Council for Compulsive Gambling, PA. We also do quarterly roundtables. Those are knowledge checks, so they're pretty much random samples of team members that we bring in to look at doing testing on Title 31 as well as responsible gaming. Daily pre-shifts will happen, as well as when we open the facility, we'll have the same system we have at PNRC, which is the state-of-the-art ID verification system, which is Veridox. So that will be at the location where the security is. That's to help control any false IDs or underage patrons entering the casino. I'm proud to say that as of November, knock on wood, but as of November, we hit 100 days. So that's a program that we'll continue to use in York. It's an enticement to make sure that our security officers are really paying attention, and we have not had any false IDs or underage patrons in over 100 days, and hopefully we can continue that stretch, and we'll continue that within York.
Excuse me, just one quick question.
Yeah.
When you say you haven't had it, means no one's gotten onto the floor. I assume there've been people that stopped during the day.
That's correct. Yes.
Thank
Yep. So as far as the economic impact on operations, you can see here, I won't go through all of these, but you can see there's one-time impacts for the township, the county, and the Commonwealth. And you can see upon stabilization for the Commonwealth, it's the impact is $97.8 million, supporting 480 jobs. And for the local impact, which is the next slide, based on the gaming revenue projections, there's $1 million annually in new revenues for Spring-Sperry Township upon stabilization, which is obviously a very significant amount. Public safety, we've had an economic impact report done on the public safety. There was minimal impacts found, which really means the very limited additional workload for the police, the fire, and the EMS. We've also had an opportunity to sit down with the fire chief and the police chief with Spring-Sperry Township to discuss some of the public service needs and safety needs. The property, as the board knows, we will have 24-hour security on site in the facility as well as in the parking facility for the mall, and as well as EMT and surveillance. Surveillance will also be outside in the mall, access in the parking area. The tourism. We've already started working with the York County Convention and Visitors Bureau, the York Revolution, and the York Expo to discuss opportunities and partnerships to drive additional visitation into the York County as well as Spring-Sperry Township. And then in summary, Penn National has been based in PA since 1972 and has grown to the largest regional gaming company in the U.S. And we've operated the Grantville Casino properties since 2008 and the OTW in New York since 1995. We are making a direct investment, net of gaming license fee of $70 million in the York Galleria Mall that will provide new visits to the mall and should become a catalyst for redevelopment. We're creating an approximately 200 well-paying jobs with benefits and significant advancement opportunities and potential with our over 41 properties within Penn National. And we're also creating over 260 construction jobs. We have discussed the local impacts resulting from the project, which should not result in any material incremental cost to the township. And once stabilized, this project is projected to create in excess of $1 million per year in tax revenue paid directly to Spring-Sperry Township. This is a significant amount of new revenue and can be used for a wide variety of projects to benefit the township and its citizens. And we also have a strong local support from the Board of Supervisors. So with that summary, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over back to Adrian.
Great, thanks, Dan. Mr. Chairman, if it makes sense, I was thinking at this point if you had any questions for this panel.
Let's see what happens.
Okay.
Anybody?
Okay.
Keep on going.
All right. Well, if I can ask Rich McGarvey just to help us switch over to one different slide, and Mr. Seitz is going to join us. Great. Okay. So before I introduce Mr. Seitz, just to orient everyone, what I've put in front of you on the screen, and actually I think everyone has in front of them a blow-up paper copy. This is the York Galleria site. The green dots are the 11 intersections, just for your knowledge, that have been studied as part of the traffic impact review. And the red outlined area of the mall building is the former Sears location in which the casino is going. At the bottom, you can see Route 30, Lancaster Pike, and along the numbers 11, 10, and 8 is Whitford Road, and at the top, 3, 4, 5, and 6 is Pleasant Valley Road. Mount Zion Road is 6, 7, 8, 9 on the right. And although I don't think we'll really discuss it, there's something called, I think, Memory Lane.
Memory Lane.
Along the left-hand side, 1, 2. So that just to give everybody a sense of where we're at. So we're going to present the testimony of our traffic expert, Mr. John Seitz, and he's a principal at Transportation Resource Group. So Mr. Seitz, just for the record, if you would read your name into the record for the court reporter.
Yes, John Seitz, Jon-Seitz.
Great. First of all, when I look at your business card, you have 2 designations after your name, PE and PTOE. Could you explain to the board what that means?
Yes, the first one, professional engineer. I'm a registered professional engineer in the state of Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Virginia. And PTOE is Professional Traffic Operations Engineer. It's a specialized designation through examination for engineers who specialize in traffic operations.
Okay. And just briefly, could you just go over quickly your educational training and your general experience over the length of your career?
Yes, I'm a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point, served 5 years in the Army as a Corps of Engineer officer. For the past 25 years, I have been working for Transportation Resource Group. As stated previously, I am a principal of the firm. On a yearly basis, am involved in or reviewing or supervising probably 50 traffic impact studies a year.
Great. If I could offer Mr. Seitz as an expert in traffic engineering, I would hope we would have agreement.
That's correct. The Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Okay. So, Mr. Seitz, just briefly, you told me a little bit before as we were getting ready for the hearing about this. How well do you know this site? Can you let the board know what you know about the York Galleria Mall and this general area at a high level?
Yes, I have grown up in the York area, minus the time that I was away at school and in the Army. I have spent really my entire life in York except for those times. The mall was built in 1990. I have been a regular shopper there since then and have seen the rise and have seen the decline of the mall. So I'm very familiar with that site.
Great. Now, tell us about the scope of your engagement by Penn National. What did they ask you to do with respect to the proposed Hollywood Casino York?
Yes, we were asked to perform a traffic impact study for the Category 4 satellite casino. We worked with Spring-and-Spray Township. We worked really hand in hand with the township in coming up with the study intersections. We evaluated, did traffic counts, and performed a level of service analysis for the proposed development. I do want to note, and this was mentioned previously, that in the traffic impact study that we did examine a worst-case scenario of 750 slot machines and 40 table games, and as was noted earlier, that it will initially have 500 slot machines and 24 gaming tables. So we have really overstated the traffic impacts within the traffic impact study.
Basically, it gives us room to grow to the full complement of tables and slots if we choose to do that.
That is correct.
Okay. Now, just so we're clear, we did an initial traffic impact study, I think, in September 2018. We got some comments back from the consultant that PennDOT's working with, I'm sorry. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And then we prepared a revised traffic impact study and also answered some specific questions in some correspondence.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Can you tell the board, how is the site accessed by casino patrons?
Yes, to the Galleria Mall, there's actually 5 access points to the mall. And as you look at the map, they would be number 4. I'll start really at in a clockwise direction. If we start at number 4, would be what we're calling the northwest entrance, onto Pleasant Valley Road. Number 5 would be the northeast entrance onto Pleasant Valley Road. Number 7 was designed as the really main access to the York Galleria Mall. That is the access point with Route 24. Then we have points 10 and 11, 10 being the southeast entrance with Whiteford Road, and point 11, the access point, which we call the southwest driveway, which intersects Whiteford Road.
Great. Now, we mentioned that you looked at all 11 of these marked intersections, and that was in connection with doing an impact study on the local road network, correct?
Yes.
And what were our findings there?
The level of service, there were really insignificant increases in delay of the level of service at one of the intersections. We did have a movement where we did have some failing conditions, but that was because of really the poor design of the original mall, how the mall was laid out originally, and just trying to work with what is there.
Was that number 11?
That is number 11, yes.
And we'll come back to that in a minute. Would you agree that, based on your study, once the casino project is built out, that all in all, impacts to the local road network would be anticipated to be minimal?
Yes.
Okay. So let me ask you this question. Seems a little counterintuitive that we're adding a casino facility to the shopping mall and that it'll have minimal effects on area roadways and intersections. What are your thoughts on why that might be the case?
You know, as I stated, I live in this area. I'm very familiar with this site. I can remember, you know, many Christmas shopping seasons where you'd be driving around the York Gallery and you'd have trouble finding a parking spot, and it's nowhere near that situation today. That the Bon-Ton is gone. This site will be in place of the Sears, which closed down in August of 2018. It's just a different flavor to the York Galleria Mall site. We don't have near the amount of traffic going into and out of this location that it was designed for and built for. That improvements were made 30 years ago to anticipate large amounts of traffic coming in and out, and we don't have that amount of traffic coming in and out anymore.
And as you said, I mean, originally this was a fully built-out mall with, I believe, 764,000 square feet of retail shopping space, thousands of parking spaces, and with 2 anchor stores, the Bon-Ton and Sears, closing, it is significantly underutilized, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, I want to talk about 2 intersections. Actually, before I do that.
If I could stop.
Yep.
Before you move to the next subject. Currently, the York Galleria Mall is not fully utilized. If you're successful, I'm not sure if this is the right fit, but
Sure.
implicit is the notion that not only will this project be successful, but it might bring more life to the mall itself. So, in thinking about the traffic study, were you assuming the current level of retail economic activities at the mall, or are you anticipating the success of your project with other stores opening in the mall and more traffic coming that has only ancillarily to do with your project?
Yes, let me say that right now the mall is seeing some alternative uses. For instance, there's a Gold's Gym in there right now, and so we're getting some uses that don't have necessarily the same peak hours of what the retail would have. And that's another thing with the casino, that the casino does not have the peak hour usages that typically the mall would have. So you are correct, but I think what's happening is that the multitude of uses, and also,
If I could stop you for a second. I was asking a question, so I'm not sure how I could either be correct or incorrect. I'm just trying to understand what assumptions you're making about, on the one hand, we will all be very excited if this produces a lot of increased economic activity down there. On the other hand, you're doing a traffic study based upon a situation which is somewhat precedent. So I'm trying to figure out how you put your optimistic forecasts about how successful you're going to be there into a traffic study when you're looking at something that is underutilized at the moment.
I mean, I think obviously that'd be a good problem to have if the development's very successful. You know, we did look at it based on the current volumes at the mall, but I think we have sufficient cushion to withstand a pretty significant amount of development and increased volume.
Okay.
And I don't want to get lost on this point.
Yeah.
And I think, if I recall, because actually I went back last night and read the transcript from the Morgantown hearing. I mean, the one thing about a casino use, and I think Mr. Seitz was getting at this, it fits into the puzzle, you know, where you've got the Gold Gym, people going to the gym in the morning, and we've gotten people going to the casino primarily on the weekends and at peak hours and in the evening. And so not everything's going to go on at once, is I think the point that we want to make sure everyone understands. You're not going to have all those uses happening at once. They actually trail out across the day. Am I correct?
Yes.
No, that part I understand. I don't want to make more of this. I'm just trying to get to a key point here, which is if this brings other retail activities back into the mall with higher volume, what assumptions did you make when you were doing your traffic study about the secondary consequences of your own success?
I think it goes back to what was stated, that there's a lot of capacity remaining, that we did not, you know, grow them all back to, you know, filled out, you know, Bon-Ton coming back, JCPenney coming back, so we don't have that assessment in there, but we do feel that there's sufficient capacity remaining in that mall site. And once again, that the uses will come at different times. The other thing I think we're seeing is that in retail settings, I don't know if you know, any of you did some Amazon shopping, you probably did. And I just don't think we're seeing the amount of retail typically that we historically have seen. So you know, in my professional opinion, that we will be in good shape traffic-wise at the mall.
Okay. Now, we mentioned, you heard testimony, and you're aware, we entered into a development agreement with Spring-Sperry Township, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right, and that requires us, Penn National, to make certain improvements and certain payments to allow for various transportation-related construction improvements, et cetera, correct? That was a butchered question, but...
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Now, let's talk about two of this. Let's talk about intersection number 11. You talked about this briefly, and this is on Whitford Road on the southwest side. Tell us about that intersection and what we're going to be doing there to improve the flow. And I think you also have a historical assessment of that intersection.
Yes, intersection number 11, which we call the southwest driveway with Whiteford Road, that it's actually, when you look at the 5 access points to the mall, that is probably has the worst design, and I'm going back 30 years ago when I say this, when the mall was originally designed 30 years ago, that there's the least amount of storage and stacking and capacity there. But when we do our traffic counts, we find out that that's the busiest intersection, that's the one where people want to go into today, and that's where historically people have wanted to go in and out of that driveway. The way it was designed today, it's full access movement. There's only about storage and stacking for 2 or 3 vehicles before they stack back into the mall ring road. If you'll notice, US 30 is directly south of Whiteford Road. There's right-of-way fencing between US 30 and Whiteford Road, and there is no room to ideally, and we looked at this, and we talked to the township. It's a very iterative process with the township where we wanted to ensure that the improvements we recommended met what the township was looking for. So we did work with them. We had a number of different options to look at, and what we came up with in working with the township was to make that a right-in, right-out driveway. It's going to make that intersection much safer and easier for vehicles to get in and out of. Right now, it's a very deficient, as I said, it's the busiest intersection coming in and out of the mall, but really is not designed, 30 years ago, it was not designed appropriately.
Just for the record, could you explain what right in, right out means? I think I know what it is.
Yes, meaning that at intersection number 11, so the traffic that wants to go to the site, into the York Galleria property, if they're traveling westbound on Whiteford Road approaching point 11, that they can make a right turn in. However, if traffic is on Whiteford Road heading from west to east, they cannot make a left turn in. And likewise, that if traffic wants to leave the mall site, that they can make a right out onto Whiteford Road and travel west, but they cannot make a left turn and travel east on Whiteford Road.
Okay. And we will be, Penn National, we will be making those improvements, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And you prepared a budget on the cost of those improvements?
Yes,
And am I correct, and I'm showing it to you, that the cost there is about $175,000?
that is correct.
Okay. All right, next, let's talk about intersection 10, and that's also on Woodford Road on the southeast side. What are we doing there?
There, we are looking at a traffic signal when warranted. That intersection has been brought to the attention of Spring Township for a number of years. There was a bank property which went on the south side of Whiteford Road a number of years ago. The township asked that developer to look at a traffic signal. Traffic signal warrant analysis was done at that time. At that time, a traffic signal was not warranted. But the township does have an agreement with that developer to contribute some monies towards a traffic signal. PennDOT wants to see the traffic volumes that are there to justify and warrant a traffic signal before they allow the installation of a traffic signal. So right now, today, the amount of volume is not there. However, in the future, with the Satellite 4 casino at the Galleria site, and with the rerouting of traffic due to the right-in, right-out at intersection 11, we see that the traffic will increase at intersection 10, and the very strong possibility that a traffic signal would be warranted at that intersection.
And am I correct that under the development agreement, Penn National is making a contribution of $210,000, paying that to the township for the costs of that signal when warranted?
Yes, that's correct.
All right, and that'd be in addition to the $100,000 that's already on deposit, as you mentioned, from the other developer?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And then in terms of one other cost item in the development agreement, am I correct that it also includes Penn National making contribution of $15,000 to the township for sidewalk improvements?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Well, with that, I think we are concluded with Mr. Seitz's direct testimony. And again, with your permission, Mr. Chairman, if anyone has any questions of our traffic expert, we'd be happy to have him available.
Any question? Any question? Okay.
I have a question.
Yep.
Mr. Seitz, if we could pull the map back up. So if you're taking away the left turn at entrance 11,
Yes.
that will funnel the traffic to entrance 10. Would the other option be to continue to Pleasant Valley Road and use entrance 4?
Yes, in our traffic impact study, we assume that half of the left turns which formerly would come in at intersection 11, half of those would come in at intersection 10, and then half of those would come in at intersection 4.
Okay. And just for my own edification, is that a baseball field, or is that a school, or is that a park? Further to the, I guess to the right?
On the east side,
Right.
east side of Route 24, yeah, that's a Springettsbury, it's a Springettsbury Township, it's a township complex.
Okay.
The township office building is over there. Those are lands owned by Springettsbury Township. And yes, there's are some ball fields over there.
Okay, and I also read in your report there's a church in the area, Connection Christian Church, I believe. Can you tell me where that's located?
I believe.
It's, yeah,
Remember right?
no. Hold on.
I believe it's on page 4 of your, the surrounding land uses and land use context.
Yeah.
It says Connection Christian Church and Metso.
Oh, yes, yes, that, it's a relatively new church. It is near intersection 5.
Okay. Okay. I also read that Penn National is going to also add some more landscaping around the area. Would that be sufficient enough to, I guess, isolate it from other sections of the mall, or isolate it from other sections of the community?
I will be honest with you that was handled by the project civil engineer. I was not involved in landscaping and really can't offer an opinion on that.
Okay. All right. Well, those are the only questions I have.
Any other questions?
John, you have anything?
Okay. Well, with that concludes the testimony.
One second, Agent.
I'm
I
sorry.
think John had a question.
Oh, I had follow-up questions
Well, I
for
was
the
going to ask.
presentation.
Yeah, I just
Okay.
want to make sure they're finished with their presentation and the questions.
Right.
At that point, I'd just open it up to questions from Enforcement Council.
Okay.
And comments, unless, Mr. King, do you want to move something, or want to wait to do that?
The only thing, and I can do this now, or when OEC is done with their presentation, and I know they want their traffic expert up as well, is we do have some exhibits that I just want to move into the record.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and do that?
Okay, so we have exhibits A through G. First are the minutes of the Springettsbury Township Conditional Use Hearing approving the Category 4 satellite casino to be located at the mall. It's dated August 22nd, 2019. Exhibit B is the Pennsylvania State Horse Racing Commission order, which is allowing us to relocate our York OTW to this site. That's dated August 27th of 2019. Moving in is Exhibit C, our revised traffic impact study dated September 2019. Exhibits C1 and C2 are the concept plans for the improvements to the southwest driveway that we just discussed and the southeast driveway. And when I say I'm moving in the revised traffic impact study, in terms of the paper version, I'm only moving in the study itself. All the exhibits have been provided electronically, and I'm assuming we can move all of those in together.
And we have received those and reviewed them.
Okay, and then D would be the Transportation Resource Group response letter to McMahon Associates comments, and that's dated September 12th. Exhibit E is a letter from Jessica Fieldhouse, who's the Director of the Community Development for Springettsbury Township, regarding the status of approvals for the casino project dated October 22nd. Exhibit F is the Springettsbury Township Board of Supervisors meeting agenda for November 13th, 2019. This is the meeting at which the development plan was approved. The minutes are not yet available. We're moving in the agenda just to show that it was considered. And Exhibit G is the executed development agreement between the township with their signature and our signature, and that's dated November 13th of 2019. And so with that, I'd like to move all of those exhibits into the record.
No objection.
So moved. At this point, here with questions, comments, and eventually whatever witnesses want to call. Proceed.
Thank you. Just a couple follow-up questions to the presentation itself. What are your plans to create synergy between the sports and the race book available at the facility?
I think, as you'll recall, we have a combined race and sports book at the Grantville property. So, we have done this before, and we've had a good deal of success exposing the racing customer to sports betting and vice versa. So that we're going to very much follow that template that we have at the Grantville property.
Do you have any plans to open a poker room at this facility?
We do not.
Will the entire facility be 21 and over, or will minors be permitted into the facility for non-gaming amenities?
21 and over, no minors, including the food and beverage outlets.
And how many part-time employees do you anticipate the facility having?
I would probably say maybe 30% of the total.
Okay. And will any benefits be provided to part-time employees?
They will not.
Do you plan to install any type of employee dining room or cafe as an additional benefit to full-time employees?
Yes, we'll have a employee dining area that will have full access to both part-time and full-time.
Of the initial 500 slot machines, how many of them will be owned by Penn National as opposed to leased?
We typically have a lease footprint of about 2 to 4% on the floor, so the rest of them would be owned by us.
And what, if any, training programs will be provided to service staff for the prevention of serving alcohol to overly intoxicated guests?
We'll continue to utilize the same training services that we use at PNRC, which is the RAMP certification training for all of our team members required by PGCB.
And which groups of employees will receive that training?
Well, it's a whole laundry list of team members that are required through the state, but it's food and beverage, it's gaming supervisors for both slots and tables, it's any cocktail servers, bartenders, so anybody that actually has contact or service with alcohol, as well as all of our security personnel and our housekeepers that are also on the gaming floor.
Are there any plans to create a synergy between this York property and the flagship property in Grantville? Or will there be any type of exclusive rewards or amenities specific to the York property that would not be available in Grantville?
So I would say in general, they'll all be connected with our overall Penn National My Choice loyalty program. So there will be that integration, as well as between the York, the Morgantown, and which is referred to as a mothership. There'll be synergies between all three working together, as there will be some common consistencies with the database.
And are there, or do you know if, will there be any bus routes or public transportation available to bring individuals to the York Galleria Mall area in this facility?
I don't know that for certain right now. We haven't gotten to that stage. I do believe, though, that there is some bus routes that we would be happy to work with the county and the township providing bus routes to the casino.
Are there currently any plans to sell the real property of this facility to the GLPI REIT?
No, we currently lease the property from CBL. So, if we were to acquire it, then maybe that would be something we'd look at down the road, but currently, no.
Okay. And when do you anticipate that the facility will be open to the public?
We anticipate about 12 months of construction remaining, so sometime in that timeline, the 12 to 13-month range from
Great.
today.
I have no further follow-up questions, but at this time, OEC would like to call one witness, Chris Bauer. OEC would like to call Chris Bauer to discuss the traffic impact study review. The board has previously accepted Mr. Bauer as an expert for the purpose of reviewing traffic impact studies in these Category 4 hearings, specifically the Category 4 hearing held on June 12th for Mountain View Thoroughbred Racing Association's Morgantown facility, and on August 14th for Stadium Casino Westmoreland's facility. As a result, barring no objection, we would request that the board continue to accept Mr. Bauer as an expert for these purposes.
No objection.
Steve?
Thank you. Mr. Bauer, if you could just please state and spell your name for the record.
Christopher K. Bauer, B-A-U-E-R.
And can you please tell us who your employer is and how they became involved in this process?
Sure, I work for McMahon Associates. I am an associate and general manager of their Camp Hill office. We are under contract with PennDOT, and we reviewed the traffic impact study prepared by TRG for PennDOT.
Okay, and were you specifically tasked with reviewing and assessing the traffic impact study for this Category 4 facility at the York Galleria Mall?
Yes.
And did McMahon review a traffic impact study related to this project?
Yes.
And what methodology was used for your review?
Industry standards and PennDOT standards for the review of traffic impact studies.
And what specifically was your individual involvement with that review?
Review and oversight of the review.
And were the results of that review provided to the board?
Yes.
At any time during your review and assessment of this information, did anyone attempt to influence or coerce you to provide a favorable or an unfavorable result?
No.
Were you notified of anyone attempting to influence or coerce McMahon during the review?
No.
So can you please tell us who prepared the traffic impact study?
John Seitz of TRG.
And when was that traffic impact study prepared?
The original study was dated September 28, 2018, submitted to McMahon Associates in May of 2019 for review. McMahon issued a comment letter June of 2019, and then the study was revised in September 2019 to address comments noted in the June 2019 letter. McMahon recently reviewed the study to determine if the June 2019 comments were satisfactorily addressed and issued a response letter on 12/17/2019.
Okay, and did McMahon respond to that traffic impact study?
Yes.
And how so?
We issued a comment letter dated June 6th, the original dated in June 6th, and then a response letter for the revised traffic impact study on 12/17.
Okay, and can you please describe the contents of the initial response dated June 2019?
The June 6, 2019 letter noted several technical items in the traffic study that needed to be addressed.
Okay, I'm going to ask to have that letter marked as OEC Exhibit 1. Can you please tell us, was that letter provided to Penn National, and how did they respond to that June of 2019 letter?
Yes, it was provided to Penn National. The applicant revised the traffic impact study to address our comments. McMahon has prepared a response letter noting our concurrence with the findings of the study and recommend acceptance of the study findings. This letter is dated 12/17/2019. It should also be noted the applicant worked with Springersbury Township to enter into a development agreement to provide financial support for improvements along township roads that are predicted to have impacts from development traffic. The primary improvement will be the installation of the traffic signal improvements at intersection number 10, the southeast mall access to Whiteford Road. The traffic operations on the township roads will be monitored by the township, and when the township deems improvements are needed, the township will notify the applicant and proceed with design and permit of the improvements.
Okay, so McMahon has reviewed that development agreement.
Yes.
And does that agreement outline all the traffic improvements agreed upon between the facility and the township?
Yes.
And do the traffic improvements outlined in the development agreement satisfy all of PennDOT's concerns with the development?
Yes.
Okay, you also mentioned a letter generated from McMahon this month, December of 2019. Can you please tell us what that letter stated?
That letter stated that we were in agreement with the findings of the traffic impact study and that we recommend approval.
Okay, and I'm going to ask that marked as OEC Exhibit 2. There was a statement made during the presentation that the traffic impacts would be minimal. Would you agree with that statement?
I would.
Okay. And it was further stated that there was enough of a cushion built in that if the area around the York facility were to be further developed, that it also, there's enough room that an increase in traffic would not have any negative impacts. Would you also agree with that?
I would agree with that because the trip generation that was performed at the initial development of the project, retail has changed so dramatically from when those improvements were put in to today that there is significant amount of capacity that's allowable, that's still out there.
Okay. If I can point your attention to what was marked as number 11 on the traffic map that was used during their presentation, do you agree that the installation of a right-in, right-out turn at that location would sufficiently address any traffic concerns that could be presented there?
Yes.
Okay. And is there anything further that you would like to provide regarding your independent traffic review of the proposed project?
No, I think the only thing that I would add is that the applicant has addressed all of our concerns and has worked with the township on their concerns and have entered into a developer's agreement to fund improvements as needed.
And that's all to PennDOT satisfaction?
Yes.
Okay. I have no further questions at this time, and I would just ask to have my 2 exhibits moved into the record at the appropriate time.
No objection.
So moved. Before we proceed, are there any questions for the witness? Board?
Thank you. And we have no further presentation.
And Mr. Chairman, may I just formally put on the record, obviously, our request for our license application for Hollywood Casino York to be approved.
So received. Do you have any questions for enforcement counsel of any sort?
No, we do not.
Any other questions from the board?
I do have a question, only because this is going to be connected to a mall, so you'll have a lot of traffic of underage individuals in the mall. Do you foresee the need for extra security or some safeguard to keep people who are shopping, who are 18 years old, who see the attraction to the casino trying to gain entry?
There isn't actually an entrance from the mall to the casino, or there won't be. So the only way to get into the property is through, as we showed you on the site plan, through the main entrance, the Port Cashir entrance. So there's one entry point, which we did for obvious reasons. So we're very confident we'll be able to keep minors out of the property through that one entry point.
Thank you.
No other questions? Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Chairman.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I have 2 questions. One, are you at all worried about a Category 4 having an impact on your Granville facility, or it's all Penn National?
As far as an economic impact?
Like economic impact, like people won't make the trip to Hershey, they can go to York, or
I mean, we certainly are anticipating an economic impact at Penn National.
have you
Look, I mean, we have some internal projections, but until it's actually open and operational, it's hard to pinpoint an exact number. But I think generally, the expansion throughout the state is going to have impact on all the existing licensees. We're not alone in that regard.
Speaking of the financial impact, different things, games of skill obviously are a big.
Jen, can't
Oh,
hear.
sorry. Speaking of the financial impact on the industry regarding just expansion of gambling, but then you also have skill games. What is the national's kind of position on skill games and their financial impact that they're having on the industry right now?
Yeah, I mean, we're obviously strongly opposed to the proliferation of skill games. We do think not only does it have a negative economic impact for the regulated casinos, but it also just sends a bad message and is, in our view, just generally bad for the industry.
There's also certainly an impact to the state of Pennsylvania as well.
Thank you.
We will be taking this up in the Bureau of Licensing's portion of the agenda. Thank you for your time and your patience and your involvement.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next order of business is to consider a motion to approve the minutes and transcripts of the October 30th, 2019 meeting. May I have such a motion?
Chairman, I move that the board approve the minutes and transcript of the October 30th, 2019 meeting.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? The motion's adopted. Next order of business, Danette, Director of the Human Resources.
Good morning, Chairman, board members. The Office of Human Resources has one motion for your consideration today relative to the hiring of 5 individuals. All of these individuals have completed the interview process, background investigations, and drug screening. First is Amina Lanker, who has been selected as an administrative assistant in the Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement and is recommended for hire by Paul Morrow, Bureau Director for Investigations and Enforcement. Second is Wongfeng Cody Chan, who has been selected as a specialized investigator in the Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement and is recommended for hire also by Paul Morrow, Bureau Director for Investigations and Enforcement. Third is Ted Fullerton, who has been selected as an auditor in the Bureau of Gaming Operations and is recommended for hire by Paul Resch, Bureau Director for Gaming Operations. Fourth is Gregory Wall, who has been selected as the Director of Cybersecurity in the Bureau of Administration and is recommended for hire by Claire Yantis, Administrative Director. And finally, Edward Luckenball has been selected as an Information Technology Generalist in the Office of Information Technology and is recommended for hire by Steve Dunn, Director for the Office of Information Technology. Unless you have any questions, I ask that the board consider a motion to approve the hiring actions as indicated.
Are there any questions or comments, board, about these hires? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the applicants for hire as proposed by the Human Resources Director.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted. Thanks,
Thank
Danette.
you.
Thank you very much. Doug Sherman, Chief Counsel.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. Our first agenda item relates to a proposed regulation, which Assistant Chief Counsel Chad Zimmerman is here to present.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the board. Before you for consideration today is proposed rulemaking number 125-229. This packet of regulatory material provides the regulatory scheme for Subpart L of the board's regulations, which deals with interactive gaming. This subpart contains 18 chapters and covers all aspects of interactive gaming, from the initial issuance of certificates and licenses to entities in order to conduct interactive gaming, all the way through the commencement of operations. Matters covered include, but are not limited to, the technical requirements for interactive gaming systems, the interactive games themselves, player accounts, standards for compulsive and problem gaming, and internal controls and accounting. These regulations are largely based upon the temporary regulations that were previously adopted by the board in 2017 and 2018 in 6 different regulatory packages. Interactive gaming has been offered in the Commonwealth for approximately 5 months now under these temporary regulations, with administrative clarifications that were issued. Prior to drafting this material, board staff solicited input from the interactive gaming industry in the Commonwealth on the efficacy of the temporary regulations, and what matters should be addressed in the proposed rulemakings. Those comments were taken into consideration when preparing these regulations and when making changes to the temporary regulations. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have at this time, or if not, I would request a motion to approve the proposed rulemaking number 125-229.
Are there any questions or comments from the board in this matter? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt proposed regulation number 125-229 regarding interactive gaming as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, the board has 5 petitions before it for consideration. These matters will each be decided on the documentary record by agreement of the parties. In addition to these matters, the board has, in advance of the meeting, been provided with all of the documents filed of record in each matter. The first petition before the board is that of Downs Racing LPs, and it's their request to open a sports wagering facility at one of its 2 non-primary locations. By way of background, on May 15, 2019, the board granted Downs Racing LPs petition to conduct sports wagering at its Category 1 licensed facility, which they operate near Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. Downs would now like to offer sports wagering at the Downs at Lehigh Valley, their affiliated off-track betting facility, as is authorized under Section 13C21 of the Act. They have sought approval of the Horse Racing Commission to renovate the facility in order to accommodate sports wagering, and they plan to have 10 sports wagering kiosks and 4 tellers at that location. Should the board approve the request, to be clear, it will not be authorizing the licensee to commence the operation of sports wagering immediately, but rather sports wagering will begin only after the board staff has reviewed all aspects of the sports wagering area and the proposed operation. A successful test period will also have to be completed, and as with all prior sports wagering petitions that the board has heard, the Office of Enforcement Counsel has requested a number of conditions to be fulfilled prior to the commencement of sports wagering operations at the Downs at Lehigh Valley. The board, or the parties, have also requested that certain portions of the record be maintained as confidential. We would agree that there are certain portions that are confidential under the Act, and this matter is now ready for the board's motion.
One clarifying question. Where physically is the Downs at Lehigh Valley?
It's right off of, I believe it's Route 78, or it's in Allentown, right off the highway. I'm not sure whether it's Route 78 or Route 22, but they're in the Allentown area.
And that facility already exists, it's just being upgraded?
Correct. It's currently an operational off-track betting facility.
Thank you. Are there other questions from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board grants Down Racing LP's petition for authority to conduct sports wagering at the Downs at the Lehigh Valley as described by the Office of Chief Counsel. I further move that the board grants in part petition's request for confidentiality as will be described in the board's order.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Okay. Next before the board is Wind Creek Bethlehem's request for approval of a shared service agreement with its parent company, Wind Creek Hospitality. By way of background, on May 29, 2019, the board approved the joint petition of Sands Bethworks Gaming and Wind Creek Hospitality requesting a change of control resulting in Wind Creek Hospitality now owning 100% interest in the casino. At that time, the casino was also approved for retitling from the Sands Casino Bethlehem to Wind Creek Bethlehem. In accordance with a condition in the board's May 29th order and the board's regulations, Wind Creek Bethlehem and Wind Creek Hospitality have filed their current petition for approval of shared services. Per the agreement, Wind Creek Hospitality will be providing services to Wind Creek Bethlehem in connection with Wind Creek Bethlehem's operation and management of the gaming and ancillary facilities. The services to be provided include, but not are limited to, finance, long-term business planning, budgeting, marketing, human resources, operations support, IT services, business and legal services, communications, and governmental affairs. The Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objection to the request, subject to conditions outlined in their answer, And again, there's no objection to some confidentiality provisions that were requested to be maintained as confidential, and this matter is now ready for the board's consideration.
Any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the petition for approval of a shared services agreement in its request for confidentiality as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next matter before the board is a joint petition filed by Bally Gaming Incorporated, NYX Digital Gaming USA LLC, and Open Bet Technologies Limited for the approval of a change of control of certain subsidiaries in the Scientific Games Corporation family of entities. And related to that, they're also requesting leave to surrender the affiliate licensees of Bally Technologies Incorporated and NYX Digital Gaming Americas LLC, which will be merging into other entities in this restructuring. The requested mergers are part of an internal restructuring of Scientific Games. One merger will consist of Bally Gaming Incorporated and Bally Technologies Incorporated entering into an agreement whereby Bally Technologies will merge into Bally Gaming Incorporated. Once the transition is complete, Bally Gaming Incorporated will become a direct wholly owned subsidiary of Scientific Games. Bally Technologies will no longer exist, and therefore their license will be surrendered. NYX USA and NYX Americas is the other piece of the merger. These parties will enter into an agreement whereby NYX Americas will merge into NYX USA, and upon completion of that transaction, NYX USA, as the surviving entity, will change its name to SG Digital USA LLC, and it'll become a wholly owned subsidiary of Scientific Games. NYX Americas will no longer exist, and therefore it would also be surrendering its license. The Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objection to the approval of the joint petition. Again, subject to several conditions, primarily related to the Bureau of Licensing's requirements and transactional documents. This matter is now ready for the board's consideration.
Questions or comments?
I have to ask. Leave, where is leave in all this? What is leave? Leave, L-E-A-V-E. It's a change of control for leave to permit a surrender.
For leave, permission.
Permission.
L-E-A-V-E.
Because it was capitalized there, it sounded like there was a...
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I'll blame that on Mr. Cook.
Does Mr. Cook accept responsibility?
He's my boss, I guess.
I just wanted to prove I read it.
Well done.
That was why I was delayed on the other one, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry.
Well done. Well done.
All right.
Are there any other questions on this Bally matter? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Yes. Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the joint petition seeking approval of a change in control and for leave to permit the surrender of the affiliate licenses of Bally Technology, Inc. and NYX Digital Gaming Americas with the conditions to be outlined in the board's order.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next petition before the board today is Cartamundes Incorporated's petition for approval of a change of control of United States Playing Card Company. The U.S. Playing Card Company is a table game manufacturer licensee. USPC Holding Incorporated, Bicycle Holdings Incorporated, Newell Brands Incorporated, and Jarden Corporation are all upstream licensed affiliates of U.S. Playing Card Company. In June of 2019, Newell entered into a definitive stock purchase agreement to sell 100% of their interest in Bicycle Holdings through the Jarden Corporation to Cartamunde. Upon completion of the transaction, Bicycle will become a wholly owned subsidiary of Cartamunde through USPC Holdings and US Playing Card Company. Jarden and Newell will no longer have any ownership in Bicycle, the USPC Holding or US Playing Card Company, and the U.S. Playing Card Company will continue to do business in Pennsylvania under their current manufactured license, just with a different owner. No changes are occurring to the executive management team other than the current secretary of U.S. Playing Card will be replaced, and principal license applications for all new individuals have been filed. The Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objection to the petition for change of control, subject to several conditions outlined in their answer, most of which pertain to licensing requirements and closing documents once the merger has occurred. The Office of Enforcement Counsel also asks that the board impose a condition on the licensee that post-closing of the transaction, all Pennsylvania revenues of U.S. Playing Card Company be placed into escrow until such time that all necessary individuals have been licensed. We would agree that would be an appropriate condition, and the matter is now ripe for the board's consideration.
Anybody else want to show off with the questions on this? If not, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant Cartamundi Inc. petition approving its proposed acquisition of the United States Playing Card Company as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion adopted.
And the final petition before the board is that of Matthew Roca, and it's his request to be removed from the board's involuntary exclusion list. In July of 2016, Mr. Roca, who was 19 years old at the time, attempted to enter Mount Airy Casino by providing a false identification to security. He was charged with a summary offense and evicted from Mount Airy. Subsequently, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a petition to place Mr. Roca on the board's involuntary exclusion list. On November 16, 2016, the board placed him on that list until his 22nd birthday, at which time he could seek to be removed from the exclusion list. Mr. Roca is now 22 years of age and is requesting removal from the exclusion list. There's no objection to that. It would be appropriate for the board to consider a motion granting the relief.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant Matthew Roca's petition for removal from the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next, we have withdrawals and surrenders and reports and recommendations by Deputy Chief Counsel Steve Cook.
Morning. I'm here to present the non-complicated stuff. The board has received several unopposed petitions to withdraw the applications or surrender the credentials of the following individuals or entities: Adam Lewis, Thomas Rafferty, Jason Lapina, Jamie McKay, Joseph Smith, Cheryl Todd, Rutter's Store Number 34 in Leola, Pennsylvania, and Rutter's Store Number 23 in Mountville, Pennsylvania; Kieran Power, Stars Interactive Holdings Limited, Stars Interactive Limited, and Rational Resources Limited. The Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objection to any of these surrenders or withdrawals, and as a result, if the board grants them, they'd be doing so without prejudice to each of these parties.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issues order to approve the withdrawals and surrenders as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next for the board's consideration are 7 reports and recommendations received from the Office of Hearings and Appeals. Prior to today's meeting, the evidentiary record for each of these items has been given to the board. Additionally, each of the persons or entities that is subject to a report and recommendation have been advised that the board would be taking the matter up today and that they could come forward and briefly address the board. If any of these persons or representatives of these entities are present, I'd ask and wish to address the board, I'd ask them to come forward when their matter is called. The first report and recommendation before the board today pertains to Evolution HVACR. By way of background, on April 15th, 2019, Mount Airy No. 1 LLC filed a notice with the board that it intended to use Evolution as a non-gaming service provider for heating, ventilation, and air conditioning services. On May 29th, 2019, OEC filed a notice objecting to Mount Airy's use of Evolution as a non-gaming service provider and requested that Evolution be placed on the board's prohibited non-gaming service provider list. OEC based its objection on the criminal history of the company's owners, William Stanton and Jose Azcona. Both Mr. Stanton's and Mr. Azcona's criminal records were included on the non-gaming service provider notification submitted by Mount Airy. A hearing in this matter was held on June 5th, 2019. Enforcement counsel appeared presenting testimony and documentary evidence. Mr. Stanton also appeared on behalf and testified on behalf of Evolution. The evidence presented at that hearing showed that both Mr. Stanton and Mr. Azcona served time in prison for drug-related felony offenses. The men met in prison during their vocational training in the HVAC repair and maintenance program at the Camp Hill facility, a state correctional institution, and Mr. Stanton was released from that facility in February of 2015 and began working at an HVAC company who performed services for Mount Airy shortly thereafter. A little bit after that, Mr. Azcona was released from prison in December of 2018, and he too began working for the same company. Some months later, Mr. Stanton formed Evolution with Mr. Azcona. At the hearing, Mr. Stanton testified that if Evolution was permitted to work at Mount Airy, a casino staff member would supervise them during the time they were there, and that they would only work on service calls at the casino, so therefore would not be there full-time, but only on an as-needed basis. He additionally stated that he was on supervised parole until 2022, meeting with his parole officer at least every 3 months, and is randomly drug tested. Mr. Azcona is not on parole, having fully completed his sentence. Both men's crimes were committed over 10 years ago, and neither has had any legal issues since their release from prison. After hearing all of the evidence presented, the report and recommendation issued by the hearing officer in this matter recommends that this entity, Evolution, in fact, be issued a non-gaming service provider credential and be allowed to work at Mount Airy as presented. I do believe there is a representative of the company here today to address the board.
Good, stand, be sworn.
I do. William Staton, S-T-A-T-O-N.
Good morning, sir.
How are you?
We're fine.
It's tough getting here this morning. The kids got up early. I just want to say I appreciate you guys, hearing our case, because obviously we were denied. Originally, it makes sense, they see the record, they don't know us, nothing about us, and they're like, they deny us, of course. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. Other than that, we've been super successful. I mean, we've both turned ourselves around more than 360 degrees. I mean, we took it to another level when it comes to getting praise from parole office, to the former company they worked at was like probably the biggest in like 10 states. We literally ran up the ladder. We didn't walk up the ladder, we ran up the ladder, and they were upset to see us go. And I did all the work at the casino personally. For that company was Remco out of Mechanicsburg, but the Allentown branch. And then the casino, they seen how well I did, the professionalism, and they were asking me, hey, since you're leaving, why don't you apply here? I explained to them the situation. They said apply anyway, see what happens, Follow through with it, you never know. So I followed through, and here I am today.
Anybody have any questions, comments, Mr. Stanton?
Wait, hold.
Our documents state your name as Stanton. Spell your name as Staton?
Yes, they probably put an N in there.
They did?
Yes.
Is it 2 T's or 1?
S-T-A-T-O-N. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Does anybody on the board have any questions? Mr. Stat? Thank you very much. Any other questions? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding the Office of Enforcement Counsel's request to deny Evolution HVACR's application, and that Evolution HVACR be authorized to work as a non-gaming service provider.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion is adopted. Good luck to you, sir.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Good luck.
And next before the board is a report and recommendation regarding Chester Radner. Mr. Radner holds a G2 permit and was working as an assistant pit manager at the Hollywood Casino. On September 18th, 2019, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for an emergency suspension of Mr. Radner's gaming level 2 employee occupation permit after receiving notice that he'd been charged with felony offenses. Specifically, it is alleged that Mr. Radner assaulted his girlfriend. As a result of these charges, the board's executive director issued an emergency order suspending Mr. Radner's G2 permit as requested by OEC. A hearing in this matter was held on October 10th, 2019. OEC and Mr. Radner both appeared and provided evidence. During his testimony, Mr. Radner testified that the alleged victim had been in contact with his attorney and that she plans to testify in his behalf in the criminal case. He also introduced a letter ostensibly from her stating that she is recanting her statement to the police, that she was intoxicated and was not making sound judgments at the time of his arrest. He further testified that he'd worked at the casino for 12 years without incident. Notwithstanding the evidence presented by Mr. Radner, the hearing officer issued a report recommendation recommending the suspension remain in place as the felony charges remained pending, and that is the recommendation for the board.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding the suspension of Chester Radner's gaming Level 2 employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Ronald Cook's matter is the next report and recommendation before the board. Mr. Cook holds a gaming employee occupation permit and was employed at Harrah's Philadelphia Casino as a total rewards coordinator. On October 22nd, 2019, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for an emergency suspension of Mr. Cook's gaming employee occupation permit after receiving notice that he'd been charged with firearm offenses, one of which was a felony offense. Allegedly, on October 11th, 2019, Mr. Cook entered the Delaware County courthouse, and upon entering, he informed security that he had a handgun in his bag and asked where a lockbox could be, if they had lockboxes, and if he could put his weapon into the lockbox. This triggered security checking to see if he had a valid concealed and carry permit, and it was determined that while he was previously issued such a permit, it had been revoked. As a result, he was criminally charged, and OEC asked the executive director to issue an emergency suspension based on the felony count, and the executive director did that. A hearing in this matter was held on November 7th, 2019. Mr. Cook did not attend the hearing and therefore put in no evidence mitigating the set of circumstances that were presented, and as a result, the hearing officer recommends that the suspension remain in place.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding the suspension of Ronald Cook gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Tajuddin McGough's report and recommendation is next before the board today. Mr. McGough was employed as a table games dealer at Parks. On October 17, 2019, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for an emergency suspension of Mr. McGough's gaming employee occupation permit after receiving notice that he had been charged with theft and a gaming offense. Specifically, it is alleged that on September 25, 2019, while gaming in a Delaware casino, Mr. McGough removed a $50 wager from a craps table after it was determined to be a losing wager. He then left the casino. As a result of these charges, the board's executive director issued an emergency order suspending Mr. McGough's gaming employee occupation permit as requested by Enforcement Counsel. A hearing was thereafter held under the board's regulations on October 31st. Mr. McGough appeared and testified on his own behalf. OEC obviously also put into evidence the history as I just described it. During Mr. McGough's testimony, he stated that his arrest was a misunderstanding, that he picked up the wager before he knew the result, and that once he was stopped by casino staff, he returned the $50 to them. After hearing all of the evidence presented, the hearing officer recommends that the suspension remain in place because the criminal charges in fact remain pending against Mr. McGough.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding the suspension of Tajuddin McGough's gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next report and recommendation before the board today stems from Michael Gregory's request to lift the suspension of his gaming employee occupation permit. Mr. Gregory was issued a gaming employee occupation permit in January of 2015 and was employed as a table games dealer at the Parks Casino until October of 2017 when he was terminated for attendance issues. Nevertheless, he maintained his permit. On May 24th, 2018, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a complaint requesting the suspension of Mr. Gregory's permit after it received notice that he had been criminally charged with aggravated assault, simple assault, and recklessly endangering another person. Specifically, it was alleged that while at a tailgate party after a Philadelphia Eagles game, Mr. Gregory punched another person, resulting in injuries to that individual. Ultimately, Mr. Gregory pleaded guilty to simple assault. He thereafter failed to answer the suspension complaint filed by OEC, and the board suspended his permit by default judgment during September of 2018. In June of 2019, Mr. Gregory filed the request before the board today to lift the suspension of his gaming employee occupation permit. A hearing was held on September 25th. Mr. Gregory appeared and testified on his own behalf, essentially admitting to his actions, testifying that the incident in question did not really show who he was as a person, and basically indicating that he had matured since his termination from Parks and hoped to get back into the casino industry. After hearing all of the evidence presented, the hearing officer's recommendation is that the suspension against his permit be lifted.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding Michael Gregory's request to lift his gaming employee occupation permit suspension as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter to be heard by the board is the report and recommendation regarding William O. Rangers. The Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a petition on November 26, 2018, requesting that Mr. O. Rangers be placed on the board's involuntary exclusion list. The petition alleges that on August 27, 2018, after Mr. O. Rangers had finished gaming at Harrah's Philadelphia, he began to walk towards an exit, pulled out a piece of paper from his pocket, lit it on fire, and placed it in a trash can. A hearing in this matter was held on August 21, 2019. Enforcement Counsel appeared presenting evidence, including video evidence. Mr. Rangers also appeared with his attorney and testified on his own behalf. Mr. Rangers testified that he did not intentionally start the fire. Rather, he opened his lighter to light a cigarette before realizing he was in a non-smoking section, indicating that he threw what he thought was an unlit cigarette into a trash can and left the casino. And that the casino, or the cigarette clearly was not, he didn't believe was lit. He also did not realize there was a problem or anything had happened until 13 days later when he was contacted by the police. Following the hearing and reviewing all of the evidence presented, the hearing officer recommended that Mr. O. Rangers be placed on the board's involuntary exclusion list for a period of between 1 and 5 years. And that's the recommendation to the board.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopts the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearing and Appeals regarding replacement of William O. Ranger to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list described by the Office of Chief Counsel, and that Mr. O. Rangers be permitted to petition the board to be removed from the list after 2 years.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The final report and recommendation before the board today pertains to Lauren Hill. In April of 2019, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a petition requesting that Ms. Hill be placed on the board's involuntary exclusion list, alleging that on April 1st, 2018, Ms. Hill and her husband, Sean Owens, arrived at the Sugar House Casino, parked their vehicle in the parking lot. Thereafter, Ms. Hill left the vehicle going into the casino, with Mr. Owens staying in the car with 7 of his stepchildren aged 2 to 9. After approximately a half hour, he left the children in the car unattended, met up with Ms. Hill on the casino floor and watched her game for a short period of time, but before returning to the vehicle approximately 15 minutes later. In the meantime, while Ms. Hill and Mr. Owens were both gone from the vehicle, security had found the children in the car and contacted the state police. Both Ms. Hill and Mr. Owens were permanently evicted from the Sugar House Casino. A hearing in this matter was held on September 11, 2019. Despite receiving notice, Ms. Hill did not attend the hearing, and it was held, therefore, in her absence without any mitigating evidence. And as a result, the hearing officer recommends that Ms. Hill be placed on the board's exclusion list.
Any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals. regarding the placement of Lauren Hill on the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? The motion's adopted.
And that concludes the matters of the Office of Chief Counsel.
We're going to take about a 5-minute break here, executive session, and we'll be back. The Bureau of Licensing matters.
Were you?
Okay.
Were you cold too?
Jen, are you leaving for the day? Okay.
Nothing like it's so cold.
You get away with anything.
No, she was just trying to do the
No, I didn't.
Irish
I
lead.
didn't want to start
My
the
phone's
proceeding. I
ringing.
have suddenly say, why didn't you wait for me? Okay. Next matters, Bureau Licensing, Susan Henson.
Thank you, Chairman Barash and members of the board. Before the board today will be licenses for one Category 4 facility, 5 manufacturers, 1 interactive gaming operator, 1 sports wagering operator, 1 video gaming terminal operator, and 5 conditional video gaming terminal establishments. In addition, there will be 936 principals, keys, qualifiers, and gaming and non-gaming employees. Finally, there will be the consideration of 2 certified and 7 registered gaming service provider applicants. The first matter for your consideration is the approval of Mountain View Thoroughbred Racing Association doing business as Hollywood Casino York's Category 4 slot machine operator license. As we have heard, Mountain View Thoroughbred Racing Association is seeking to locate a casino in the York Galleria Mall. The Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement has completed its investigation, and the Bureau of Licensing has provided you with a background investigation and suitability report. I have provided you with a draft order and ask that the board consider the order to approve a Category 4 license for Mountain View Thoroughbred Racing Association doing business as Hollywood Casino York.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Are there any further comments or questions? Or hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant a Category 4 license to Mountain View Thoroughbred Racing Association, LLC, doing business as Hollywood Casino York, as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion is adopted.
Next for your consideration is the renewal of the slot machine and table game manufacturer licenses for IGT. IGT is a global company with its manufacturing operations based in Nevada. The Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement has completed its investigation, and the Bureau of Licensing has provided you with a background investigation and suitability report. I have provided you with a draft order and ask that the board consider the order to renew the slot machine and table game manufacturer licenses for IGT.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Chairman, I move that the board grant IGT's slot machine and table games manufacturer license renewal as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion is adopted.
The next matter is the renewal of the IGT Global Solutions Corporation slot machine manufacturer license. IGT Global Solutions Corporation is a Delaware company that provides gaming and technology solutions worldwide. The Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement has completed its investigation, and the Bureau of Licensing has provided you with a background investigation and suitability report. I have provided you with a draft order and ask that the board consider the order to renew the slot machine manufacturer license.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the slot machine manufacturer license renewal for IGT Global Solutions Corporation, as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion is adopted.
Next is the approval of an interactive gaming and sports wagering operator licenses for Rush Street Interactive PA LLC. Rush Street has its principal place of business in Chicago, Illinois. The company provides interactive and sports wagering technologies on behalf of interactive certificate holders and sports wagering certificate holders. Rush Street Interactive PA LLC was previously issued conditional interactive gaming and sports wagering operator licenses. The Bureau of Investigation and Enforcement has completed its investigation, and the Bureau of Licensing has provided you with a background investigation and suitability report for each license type. I have provided you with draft orders and ask that the board consider the orders to approve the licenses, beginning with the interactive gaming operator license.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant Rush Street Interactive PA LLC's interactive gaming operator license as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion is adopted.
And next is the sports wagering operator license.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grants Rush Street Interactive PA LLC sports wagering operating license as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion adopted.
Also for your consideration is the approval of an interactive gaming manufacturer license for Every Interactive LLC. Every Interactive provides online slots content to interactive certificate holders. It was previously issued a conditional interactive gaming manufacturer license. The Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement has completed its investigation, and the Bureau of Licensing has provided you with a background investigation and suitability report. I've provided you with a draft order and ask that the board consider the order to approve the interactive gaming manufacturer license of Every Interactive LLC.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions, comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board grant an interactive gaming manufacturer license to Every Interactive LLC as described by the Bureau.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion adopted.
In addition, there is an interactive gaming manufacturer license for Aruze Gaming America, Inc. Aruze Gaming America, Inc. is currently licensed in good standing with the board. Under the Gaming Act, the board may use an abbreviated process to consider the application of an already licensed manufacturer. The Bureau of Licensing, Office of Enforcement Counsel, and the Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement have reviewed the application and the status of Aruze Gaming America, Inc. as a licensee, and I have provided you with the results of those reviews. I have also provided you with a draft order and ask that you consider Aruze Gaming America, Inc. for licensure as an interactive gaming manufacturer.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant an interactive gaming manufacturer license to Aruze Gaming America, Inc., as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion adopted.
Next is a video gaming terminal operator license for Lucky Day Gaming Pennsylvania LLC. Lucky Day Gaming is a Pennsylvania-based company. A VGT operator owns, services, or maintains VGTs for placement and operation at truck stop establishments. Lucky Day Gaming Pennsylvania LLC was previously issued a conditional VGT operator license. The Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement has completed its investigation, and the Bureau of Licensing has provided you with a background investigation and suitability report. I have provided the board with a draft order and ask that you consider the order to license Lucky Day Gaming Pennsylvania LLC.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions, comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant a video gaming terminal operator license to Lucky Day Gaming Pennsylvania LLC as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion adopted.
Next for your consideration are conditional VGT establishment licenses. The board may conditionally license an establishment provided the applicant has never been convicted of a felony, is current on state taxes, has submitted a completed application, and has not been convicted of a gambling law violation. A preliminary review of these applicants indicates that they meet these criteria. However, final approval will be based on the applicants meeting all of the eligibility criteria provided in the statute. A final eligibility determination will follow investigation and site inspections by the Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement. The first set of establishment applicants for your consideration are Pilot Travel Centers LLC, doing business as Pilot Travel Center number 001, located at 5868 Nittany Valley Drive, Mill Hall. Pilot Travel Centers LLC, doing business as Pilot Travel Centers number 336, located at 1742 Rich Highway in DuPuis. Pilot Travel Centers LLC, doing business as Pilot Travel Centers number 620, located at 122 Fitzhenry Road in Smithton. I ask that the board consider a motion approving the Pilot Center-related conditional establishment licenses.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the conditional video gaming terminal establishment licenses for Pilot Travel Centers LLC, doing business as Pilot Travel Centers for locations number 001, number 336, and number 620, as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion adopted.
The second set of applicants are Raceway Management Company, Inc., doing business as Hickory Run Travel Plaza, located at 2550 Route 534 in Whitehaven, and Raceway Management Company, Inc., doing business as Liberty Travel Plaza, Avis, located at 3136 Woodward Avenue in Avis. I ask that the board consider a motion approving the Raceway Management Company related conditional establishment licenses.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the conditional video gaming terminal establishment licenses for Raceway Management Company, Inc., doing business as Hickory Run Travel Plaza and Liberty Travel Plaza Avis, as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next are one-year license extensions for conditionally licensed entities. The companies were each granted a one-year conditional license approximately 1 year ago. Under the Gaming Act and board regulations, the board is authorized to extend the licenses for an additional 1 year for good cause. In each case, the background investigation and suitability report process for the company is ongoing. I ask that the board grant one-year extensions to the following companies: conditional iGaming manufacturer Majim Services OU, and conditional sports wagering manufacturer OpenBet Technologies. I have provided you with draft orders and ask that you consider a motion approving the orders.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board grants the extension for conditional license as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion adopted.
In addition, there are principals, key employees, and a qualifier. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with a proposed order for 5 principals, 5 key employees, and 1 qualifier. I ask that the board consider the order approving these licenses.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the principal and key employee licenses as gaming-related gaming service provider qualifiers described by the Bureau.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion adopted.
There are also temporary licenses for your consideration. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with an order regarding the issuance of temporary licenses for 1 principal and 10 key employees. I ask that the board consider the order approving these licenses.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the temporary principal and key employee credentials as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion adopted.
The next matters for your consideration are gaming permits and non-gaming registrations. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with a list of 714 individuals to whom the Bureau has granted temporary or full occupation permits, and 186 individuals to whom the Bureau has granted registrations. I ask that the board consider a motion approving the order.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Chairman, I move that the board grant the gaming permit and non-gaming employee registrations as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion adopted.
There are also recommendations of denial for 4 gaming employee applicants. The applicants were notified that they were being recommended for denial and failed to request hearings within the specified timeframes. The Bureau of Licensing has provided you with orders addressing each of the applicants who the Office of Enforcement Counsel has recommended for denial. I ask that the board consider the orders approving these denials.
Enforcement Council continues to request denial in each instance.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board deny the gaming employee applications as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Adopted.
The next matter for your consideration is a withdrawal request. The license is no longer required for this individual. For today's meeting, I have provided the board with 1 key employee applicant, Scott Moynihan, and ask that the board consider the order approving this withdrawal.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the withdrawal of Scott Moynihan's key employee application as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
Favor? Aye. All opposed? Adopted.
Next, we have orders to certify the following gaming service providers: Suzo Hap Gaming Solutions LLC and KH&S Contractors of New Jersey, Inc. I ask that the board consider the order approving these gaming service providers for certification.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the application for gaming service providers certification as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
Favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Adopted.
Finally, for your consideration are gaming service provider registrations. The Bureau of Licensing provided you with an order and an attached list of 7 registered gaming service provider applicants. I ask that the board consider the order registering these gaming service providers.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the applications for gaming service provider registration as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
Favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion adopted.
That concludes the Bureau of Licensing's matters.
Thank you, Susan. Irish, your team's up.
The Office of Enforcement Counsel will present 10 matters today for the board's consideration, in which we will request the board's approval of 1 consent agreement, 1 revocation, and 8 involuntary exclusions. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Category 2 licensee Sugar House HSP Gaming, LP, doing business as Rivers, Philadelphia. The consent agreement will be presented by Senior Enforcement Counsel James Armstrong. Representatives from Rivers, Philadelphia are present. At this time, I request that those individuals introduce themselves for the record, and that anyone here not as an attorney, please stand and be sworn.
I do.
Chairman, Commissioners, the next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a consent agreement reached between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Rivers Casino Philadelphia regarding 6 incidents of underage gambling. 4 of the incidents involved the same individual on 4 different dates. Commissioners, on February 11, 2018, Rivers Casino Philadelphia security officers stopped an underage woman after she presented a fraudulent driver's license as identification. The Pennsylvania State Police determined not to charge her because she did not enter the casino. Security issued the underage subject a formal eviction notice. The Bureau of Casino Compliance conducted a separate compliance review, and a surveillance check revealed that the underage patron had been able to gain entrance into Rivers Casino Philadelphia on at least 4 previous days, February 5th, 6th, 7th, and 10th, utilizing the fraudulent driver's license that the security officers either missed or ignored when a scan of the identification showed it was flagged. While in the casino on these previous 4 days, the underage patron was able to game 8 times at various blackjack games and play slot machines 8 times over the 4 days. She was also served 5 alcoholic beverages, obtained a Rush Rewards card, and utilized it 3 times at blackjack games, and was able to cash out at the cage 6 times over the 4 days. The Bureau of Casino Compliance Review determined that the underage patron was in Rivers Casino Philadelphia on at least 4 separate days for a total of at least 5 hours and 20 minutes. As a result of these incidents, the security officers involved were issued disciplinary actions, including terminations. Commissioners, on September 28, 2018, an underage patron entered Rivers Casino Philadelphia when a security officer stationed at the entrance did not request identification from him. The underage patron took a seat at a slot machine and began playing it for several minutes. He left the slot machine and walked about the casino. The underage patron returned to the same slot machine and began playing it again until he left and began walking about the casino again. The underage patron was walking past another patron playing a slot machine when he stole a voucher from the patron. As the underage patron fled the casino, he stopped at a ticket redemption machine and cashed out the stolen voucher. The underage patron was pointed out to security by the victim and taken into custody. An investigation by the police resulted in the underage patron being charged with robbery and being underage. The underage patron was in the casino for approximately 1 hour and 6 minutes and gambled on a slot machine twice. The underage patron was issued a formal eviction notice. As a result of this incident, the security officer stationed at the entrance was issued a final written warning. And Commissioners, on February 21st, 2019, an underage patron entered Rivers Casino, Philadelphia at 6:34 a.m. Surveillance coverage showed that the security officers stationed at the entrance were engaged in conversation with each other and did not request identification from him. The underage patron went to a craps game and bought in. The surveillance coverage showed that the underage patron remained on the craps game for nearly 8 hours and did not stop until confronted by a table game supervisor and security officers at 2:16 p.m. The table game supervisor asked the patron for identification, and he presented a driver's license that belonged to someone else. The underage patron was on the casino floor for approximately 7 hours and 38 minutes and gamed on craps game. The Pennsylvania State Police issued the underage patron a citation for being underage. The security officers confiscated $130 from the underage patron and issued him a formal eviction notice. The security officers who allowed the underage patron to enter the casino were issued final written warnings. Commissioners, the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Rivers Casino Philadelphia respectfully request
the board to approve the proposed consent agreement and stipulation of settlement, which requires, amongst other things, that Rivers Casino Philadelphia pay a civil penalty in the amount of $60,000 and a fee of $2,500 for costs incurred by the Office of Enforcement Counsel and other staff involved in the investigation, assessment, and settlement of this matter. Mr. Donnelly's here on behalf of Rivers. We'll be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Everything you want to say other than answering questions today?
No, Your Honor. I'd just like to introduce I brought with me two new employees from Rivers, Philadelphia. Angela Harsey, who's the new Director of Compliance, who escaped upstate New York and came down here and has 30 years in the gaming industry. And Walter Gunn, who came up from Memphis, who's a, 14-year law enforcement? 17-year police officer, Justice Department liaison from Memphis, Tennessee, who's going to be the new Director of Security. And I thought it important that the board meet both of these new employees.
Well, as new employees, there's nothing much we can ask you about these events, but welcome aboard, and we hope to see you rarely, if ever.
Yes, sir.
Okay. That said, are there questions?
If I may, you're going to tell us what happened and what procedures you're going to, let me finish.
Yeah,
Let me finish. And what procedures you're going to put in place, so it's not just coming and saying hi is nice, but.
Well, the first event's confusing because although the woman was in the casino 4 times, what happened was she came in, the machine showed a red X, she had a false ID, but then she said, I want to see a supervisor. She did see a supervisor, and she said, I've been in here, you know me. Supervisor eyeballed her ID, and he concluded that the machine was defective, and he told the guards to let her in, and they did, and in the future they let her in again, although the ID was a fake ID. So that is what happened there, and there was discipline for that because they should have. Ultimately, if the machine says X, it says X. The other 2 were just errors that the guards are instructed to card anyone who looks under 30. These 2 gentlemen, I looked at the picture. It's hard to tell from the pictures I see, but they apparently concluded they were over 30 and didn't ID them. They were both 20 years old. All 3 of these people were 20 years old, just under 21. I talked with Walter about that beforehand, and Walter has some thoughts about that, if you'd like to say anything more.
Well, we have to do a...
I'm sorry.
Yes.
We didn't...
Do I need to?
Swear him in.
They were sworn.
He was sworn in.
Okay.
That's G-U-N-N, 2 N's.
2 N's, yes. So to answer your question, we have to do all of these incidences, to me, could have been avoided if we pay attention to detail and do our job. We have established policies and procedures that we have in place to prevent this. And we have to start doing a better job of practicing those policies and procedures, excuse me. And, you know, if you can't do that, my position is you can't work as a security officer at Rivers Casino. So we're going to do a better job of enforcing policies and procedures that we have on the books, and we're going to pay attention to detail. We pre-shift this every single day. Card, ID, if you have any questions about it, call a supervisor, call a manager, call the director, and definitely if you scan ID and it shows a red X, you do not let them in the facility, period.
In that case, I'd like a motion if there is one.
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Sugar House HSP Gaming LP as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion adopted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
The next matter on the agenda consists of an enforcement action in which the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a complaint seeking the revocation of the non-gaming registration issued by the board to Jaylene Serrano. The complaint has been filed with the Board's Office of Hearings and Appeal and properly served upon Ms. Serrano, who in turn failed to respond within 30 days as required by Board regulation. As a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for default judgment and properly served the same upon Ms. Serrano. Therefore, all facts in the complaint are deemed admitted. All filed documents have been provided to the Board, and the matter is presently ripe for the Board's consideration. A brief summary of the facts and a request for the appropriate Board action will be provided by Assistant Enforcement Counsel Thomas Monahan.
Good afternoon, Thomas Monahan, M-O-N-A-G-H-A-N, with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter on the agenda for the Board's consideration is the revocation of the non-gaming employee registration issued to Jaylene Serrano. On May 14, 2019, Ms. Serrano stole the credit card numbers from a patron at Wind Creek, Bethlehem, and attempted to make 6 fraudulent charges on that card. Ms. Serrano was charged by Pennsylvania State Police for her actions. At this time, OEC requests the Board revoke the non-gaming employee registration issued to Jaylene Serrano.
Questions, comments from the Board? Hearing none, I have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Board approve the revocation of Jaylene Serrano's non-gaming employee registration as described by the Office of Enforcement.
Second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion adopted.
The remaining matters on the agenda consist of enforcement actions in which the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed petitions seeking the involuntary exclusion of individuals whose presence in a licensed facility are deemed inimical to the interests of the Commonwealth and their licensed gaming therein. In each instance, the petition for exclusion has been filed with the Board's Office of Hearings and Appeal and properly served upon the individuals named in the petition. The individual named in each petition failed to respond within 30 days as required by Board regulation. As a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for default judgment in each instance and properly served the same upon each named individual. Therefore, all facts in each petition are deemed admitted. All filed documents have been provided to the Board, and the matters are presently ripe for the Board's consideration. In each instance, if the Board orders a proposed exclusion, each individual's photo, personal identifiers, and a summary of their inimical conduct will be placed on the Board's public website.
The next matter on the agenda for the Board's consideration is a request to place Charles Thomas on the Board's involuntary exclusion list. On June 1st, 2019, Mr. Thomas left his 9-year-old child unattended in his vehicle while he redeemed a sportsbook ticket at Rivers Casino, Pittsburgh. The child was left unattended for approximately 17 minutes before being discovered by security. Mr. Thomas was permanently evicted from Rivers for his actions. At this time, OEC requests the Board place Charles Thomas on the Board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the Board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Board approve the addition of Charles Thomas to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion adopted.
Good afternoon, Chairman Barish, members of the Board. Dustin Miller on behalf of the Office of Enforcement Counsel. Next on the agenda for the Board's consideration is a request to place Frank Silvio on the exclusion list. Mr. Silvio, while a patron of Rivers Pittsburgh Casino, picked up a patron's wallet from the gaming floor and did not attempt to find the rightful owner of the wallet or turn the wallet over to casino personnel. Mr. Silvio was later charged by Pennsylvania State Police with theft and receiving stolen property. Mr. Silvio pled guilty to a reduced charge of disorderly conduct in this matter. Mr. Silvio was involved in 2 prior incidents at Rivers Casino, Pittsburgh, where he was accused of credit sweeping. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests the placement of Frank Silvio on the PGCB's exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the Board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Board approve the addition of Frank Silvio to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion is adopted.
Chairman, Commissioners, James Armstrong for the Office of Enforcement Counsel. Next on the agenda for the Board's consideration is a request to place Luke Cooper on the Board's involuntary exclusion list. Mr. Cooper cheated at the game of 3-card poker at Rivers Casino, Philadelphia by past posting his pair plus and ante bets 16 times. He admitted the conduct and made partial restitution. Accordingly, OEC requested the Board place Luke Cooper on the Board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions, comments from the Board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the Board approve the addition of Luke Cooper to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list described at the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion adopted.
Thank you. Next on the agenda for the Board's consideration is a request to place Camara Edwards on the Board's involuntary exclusion list. Ms. Edwards cheated at the game of high card flush at Rivers Casino, Philadelphia, by conspiring with another patron to switch cards to create winning hands. They were both arrested for the conduct. Accordingly, OEC requests that the board place Camara Edwards on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Tamara Edwards to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion adopted.
Thank you. Next on the agenda for the board's consideration is a request to place Rodney Williams on the board's involuntary exclusion list. Mr. Williams cheated at the game of high card flush at Rivers Casino Philadelphia by placing his cards in the form of a straight flush, in which all of the cards were the same color, but one card was a different suit, and it was actually a losing hand. Accordingly, OEC requests the board place Rodney Williams on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Rodney Williams to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
In favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion adopted.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman Barish, members of the board. Bradley McAllister, MCALLISTER, Assistant Enforcement Counsel for the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the petition for placement of Ryan Reynolds on the board's involuntary exclusion list. On April 28, 2019, Mr. Reynolds assaulted a fellow patron at the Meadows Racetrack and Casino when he punched a patron in the face, knocking him unconscious. As a result, the nightclub had to be evacuated and security resources diverted in order to render emergency medical assistance to the victim. Mr. Reynolds was criminally charged and ultimately pled guilty to simple assault, and he was issued a one-year ban from the Meadows. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board place Ryan Reynolds on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions, comments from the board? Hearing none, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board reject the addition of Ryan Reynolds to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list described by the Office of Enforcement.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion adopted.
Good afternoon, Chairman Barish, members of the board. John Crowe, CROHE, for the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next two matters for the board's consideration share a set of facts. Therefore, I will read one set of facts, then individually request that the board place each person on the exclusion list. Kate Good and Michael Nasson colluded by texting one another in order to gain an unfair advantage over other players while playing poker at Rivers Philadelphia, formerly Sugar House Casino. These two individuals exchanged text messages regarding their hands for approximately 1 hour and 48 minutes while gaming. The Office of Enforcement Counsel now requests that the board add Kate Good to the board's exclusion list.
Questions, comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Kate Good to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion adopted.
And the Office of Enforcement Counsel now requests that the board place Michael Nasson on the involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Michael Nasson to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion adopted. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you. That concludes our business.
I believe this today is scheduled for a public comment period. As I understand it, we don't have anybody here registered to speak today. Is that correct? Hearing none, I'll move on. I think that concludes our business for today. The next public meeting will be held on Wednesday, January 15th at 10 a.m. in this room, and it will be chaired by the able Commissioner.
Try.
Yes, Dante, I'm sure you'll do a wonderful job. You'll have to get by without me this time. Based upon all the above, I may have a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned.